Now, this first one is about the most bootlicking take you can possibly conceive of. Just absolute bootlicking take.
Lay it on.
This comes from Katlyn Chookagian, who also has the worst nickname in the UFC of Blonde Fighter. Yeah, that's the one. So this is in response to. This was in response to basically Jake Paul released, and I'm done hating the guy. He's come out with a couple of, very vociferous, I guess, criticisms of Dana White and fighter pay.
On the nose. On the nose.
Yeah, and I was upset that it was him who had to say it, but at this point, I'm just glad someone's saying it. So he kind of shone light on the situation that there was a UFC fighter. I forget her name, but she was having to have a GoFundMe page, right? As a professional athlete, which is shameful. And on the comments of MMA fighting, I spotted Katlyn Chookagian commenting when they released this. And she said, and I quote, "I feel like I'm the only one that disagrees with this. She could get a job while pursuing her goal/career. I bartended till after my first UFC fights. It's called hard work. You have enough time to do it till you prove yourself and are able to move up the ranks and make more money." And then with a shrug emoji after. Well, Katlyn, she's in the UFC. She's already proved herself. She's a professional athlete. She deserves a part of the pie. So, you're dumb. I don't know what to say. Like, do you think Dana's gonna see you licking the boot of the UFC and be like, "That's our girl. That's our girl"? Like, you're not a particularly entertaining fighter as it is, and now you're just trying to shit on your fellow MMA fighters, and it's just not going to endear you to anybody.
Okay, three things. One, you know how there's Uncle Tom? Is there going to be an Auntie Katlyn every time you're there?
I like it. I'm glad you said it too, and not me.
Auntie Katlyn,
Aunt Jemima.
Hey, okay. There's a couple things here. Look, at the risk of kind of peeling the curtain back and sounding a little weird, there's this dynamic that whenever something horrible happened to you and you were able to rise above it and do something well, you feel like the people next after you should be able to go through that thing.
Yeah.
For example, look, I'm not gonna hold anybody here. I used to get the bell as a kid, like many kids. Okay.
Like myself.
Me too. And I don't hate my parents. I don't think they were abusive. I don't think they're bad people. I'm just saying it was a thing. And when you talk to many people in the community who have gotten the belt, they tend to be like, beat the kids because it teaches them discipline. And I turned out fine. And look at the friends who didn't. They've gone on to go to prison or whatever. And it's like, okay, but if there's a way that you could discipline your kids without putting hands on them and they turned out fine, would you do it? And would you try to find a way to make it better for the next generation where they can be good people without having to suffer abuse? Right? Here's my roundabout point in saying that. Yes, you had to bartend while being in the UFC. Yes, you needed a second job while making it up the ranks. Yes, it was easy for you while in the UFC. And yes, your paycheck was probably $9,000 to show and $9,000 to win and a $50,000 bonus.
And a shit ton of that was probably spent on training camp and other
manager.
And taxes ate up a bunch of it. But exactly.
Exactly. Yes, all these things were hard for you. And yes, you rose above it and now you're doing well for yourself. But does that mean the next generation or the next person after you has to go through those things just because you went through them? And we see that dynamic a lot with a lot of things. It's like, I went through this, so you should too, even though we're supposed to be about progression and supposed to be about making things better.
I like that comparison, actually, and I think it rings a lot more true than you thought it would. I don't think it sounded weird at all. I think it was actually quite accurate. And I have another example, because that is an argument you hear a lot with hitting your kids, that like, I went through it and I'm fine. And like, well, again, we should be tending in the direction of bettering ourselves. Another example is when, your boomer ass parents are like, oh, I had to walk 15 miles in the snow to get to school. It's like, well, Dad, we've got public transit now.
Yeah.
And we can get to school in ways where we don't have to trudge through 15 miles of snow in the morning and can spend that time doing things productively. It's like, some suffering is good and leads to development of character. All suffering, if you survive it, can lead to development of character. Some suffering's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Some suffering is pointless. Some suffering shouldn't have to happen. And just because Katlyn Chookagian got a title shot and was working as a bartender, I'm sorry, but that's not the story of like 90% of UFC fighters. It isn't.
Yeah,
that's like the whole argument as well of like, Oprah Winfrey was able to lift herself out of poverty by starting a talk show. Well, why doesn't everyone just do that? Like, if it were so simple, like, the fact of the matter is, you work for this multi-billion-dollar organization. You contributed to bringing eyes. You are the product, and you didn't get your fair slice of the pie. And I think it's really that simple. And I don't see why that's so hard to understand.
Yeah, right. And and Jessica I making OnlyFans should sorry, not Jessica I, Jessica Penne making OnlyFans should be.
Jessica I has an OnlyFans now as well.
Oh, does she? Okay, well, yeah. Exactly my point. So
don't ask how I know. Don't ask how I know.
But them having to make an OnlyFans while being established UFC fighters should be the explanation as to what I'm trying to explain here. Yeah. But the other thing, and this is the other thing too, is when there will be, I hate to say it, but blonde fighter Katlyn Chookagian seems like she's going to be the fighter who's going to have sour grapes down the road with the UFC and how they're paying her. And wouldn't it be ironic if people point back to this quote when she's trying to explain her piece as to why she's getting hard done by the UFC?